Healthcare is changing, and Dr. Nancy RN is here for you. The topics are many, but each program stands on its own with 3 key action points for you to learn. Your guide to a healthier you in a changing world. Dr. Nancy RN.
Welcome to Dr. Nancy RN, Healthy World, Healthy Nation, Healthy You. I'm Nancy Valentine, PhD and registered nurse, and this show is dedicated to you, the healthcare consumer. And our show today is on a topic that most people really do not ever want to have to confront. It has to do with what parents face when they send their children out into the world, whether to school, to their first job, for a play date. We never know what's going to happen. And in this case, we're going to meet a very compelling couple who sent their daughter to have some fun in the summer and got a very unfortunate phone call where they found out that she had been killed by a distracted driver. We're going to hear their story today, and the title of our show is Our Beautiful Daughter Was Killed: How to Support Grieving Parents and Families When the Unthinkable Happens. And today we have Joel Feldman and his wife Diane Anderson, who are both attorneys in Delaware County. They have a very compelling story to tell you that is really about how you can help other people if they are in a similar situation. We're going to be talking about their gorgeous daughter, Casey Anderson Feldman. Casey is a lovely young woman that had everything going for her. She had a beautiful life. She was killed between her junior and senior year at Fordham University in New York. She was killed when she was at the seashore, and they will tell you the details of that. But Casey as a person was a lovely woman who was in journalism school, was a fabulous writer that was getting awards. It was unthinkable to think that her life would be taken in such short notice. So we want you to listen to this show because it really is very uplifting and gives you a lot of hope, because you don't know when you might be faced with this, or you will know people that have been having to face this. And our show today is to help you have the words and the gestures and know how to deal with this in a very positive way. So thank you for joining us, and I'd like to introduce our 2 guests. First, Joel Feldman. I'd like to introduce you, attorney, who you told me in preparing for this show that you got a counseling degree, and we'll go into that as part of this discussion. Yes. Because it was just so fortuitous that you were following that path, and then you had to deal with this on a very personal level. And then his wife, Diane Anderson. I want to really give you a lot of credit for being with us today, because I know it must be, even at this number of years later, a very difficult conversation, and you really are to be congratulated for sharing it with us today. So I really want to thank you. And as you can see, this beautiful photo book that Diane put together of her daughter Casey really helps us to impart Casey's spirit and image with us today. Casey's aspiration was to be a broadcast journalist, so let's have this show in memory of her and have her with us, really aspiring and meeting her goal in this really indirect way. So let's start with hearing about Casey. And Diane, you're the mom, and you got that phone call, but tell us about Casey first.
Casey was not only beautiful, as you can see from the pictures, she was also brilliant. She was loving, she was compassionate, she was funny as heck, she had a great sense of humor, she was a wonderful friend, a loyal friend. She had oodles and oodles of friends, both back here in Pennsylvania and then also in New York City. And the important thing was that she was beautiful on the inside, just as beautiful on the inside as she was on the outside.
Right. That's a treasure, and really speaks very well to her parenting. I mean, what both of you gave her, she obviously was a reflection of that. So you're to be congratulated for doing such a great job.
Well, thank you.
No, it's really important. And I did get a chance to go through this beautiful photo album that I referenced earlier, and it is really filled with the pictures that, just as Diane described, you can see this girl was just bubbling over with life. There was no doubt about it.
Oh, no question about it. Casey lived life to the fullest. And, you know, one of the things that she was also passionate about, and she was passionate about many things. She was involved in theater. She was an accomplished equestrian. She had a beautiful voice. She sang in the chorus at school.
That's lovely.
She had all kinds of experience with writing, not just as editor of her school newspaper, at college, but she had a lot of jobs up in New York during her schooling there where she was writing, as well as during high school and in the summers. And it was this her last summer between her junior and senior year at college. We had a house at the shore for her entire life. And she said, you know what, Mom, I think this summer, because I'm going to be graduating next year, I'd like to live at the shore and just have almost like a mindless job. So she
Right.
got a job waitressing on the Ocean City
Oh,
boardwalk.
now that's fun.
Yes. And she was actually heading to her job at the time when the accident occurred.
I see. Can you tell us what happened, just so we have a picture of that circumstance?
She had parked her car. It was roughly 5 o'clock in the evening, so it was daylight, and she was doing everything she should be doing. She was walking through a intersection. There it was a four-way intersection with stop signs. She had gotten most of the way across the street, and a 58-year-old man driving a commercial van was reaching for something to get to his GPS and rolled through the stop sign, hit her, and said that he never saw her.
I see.
And she was also in a crosswalk at the time. Not only were there stop signs four-way at that intersection, but she was also crossing in a crosswalk.
I see. So we would have to assume she never saw this coming. We don't know that.
We don't know. Unfortunately, yeah, she was killed.
Right. So Diane, you told me that you got that phone call. Can you just tell us about that experience?
Well, when I heard that there had been an accident in Ocean City, I did not realize she was a pedestrian, and I was in Sea Isle. We just kissed and said goodbye. I hugged her, 20 minutes before this occurred. And I was composed. My sister and my niece drove me to Atlantic City Medical Center, and the whole way there I was thinking, don't get too excited. How bad can it be? She was in a big SUV. The speed limits in Ocean City are only 25 miles per hour. It was
Right.
probably a fender bender. And it really wasn't until we got into the hospital and they took me and my sister and my niece into a separate room. 2 nurses came in, and it was then that I found out that she was struck as a pedestrian and run over.
I see. And then how did they deal with it with you? Did they tell you that she was dead at that
They told
point?
no, they told me that she was in surgery.
I see.
And of course, I was hoping for the best. I
Right.
thought, oh, she's in surgery. Yeah, she's alive. And they
Right.
did say we lost her a couple times, but we brought her back, and they're doing surgery.
Okay. And then it just didn't work out.
No, and Joel, of course, he found out probably a little differently. I guess I made the call to you initially, didn't I, Joel?
Yeah, I was working, so I had an hour and a half drive, and just to talk about how great people can be, I was with someone who was an off-duty state policeman, and he wouldn't let me drive my car to the hospital.
That was
He
very
got a-
smart.
He got a neighbor, and they drove me in his car, and then the neighbor followed in my car. And when we got to the hospital, and I finally met up with Diane, the other family members who were waiting, they told us again she was in surgery. They were doing all she could. They came out a little while later, and of course I have no conception of time when this is going on. They came out later and they said that it's not going well. You should prepare yourself. And I remember that Diane and I left the other people. We walked down the hallway towards an elevator, and we contemplated the fact that Casey might not survive. And then a couple minutes, well, I'm not sure again at time, but a little while later, a male surgeon, a female surgeon came out, and you could tell just by looking at their faces, you knew that Casey had died. And they said to us, your daughter did not survive surgery. We did all we could. Your daughter did not survive surgery. We did all we could. And they kept saying it. And finally I held up my hand. I just told them to stop. And that moment is how we sort of define our lives. Everything that took place before Casey was killed and everything since.
Right, right.
And looking back at it in that moment, I was angry at them. I was angry at them because they said, your daughter, and they didn't say Casey. and we'll talk about that more, I think, as we go on.
Right.
But that's the way it was.
Right. So in that moment, it was a watershed experience. It had to be, because your whole life, you could just probably see it changing right before your very eyes.
I was in total shock. I was in like kind of an altered state of
Right.
reality at that
Right.
point. I don't know how else to describe it.
Right.
And, it was, I don't know, interesting. I don't know what the word is, but as we were driving back from the hospital, and my son was with us at that point, we had to drive from the shore back to Springfield, Pennsylvania, where we lived. I remember just saying to Joel, and I don't want anybody coming over to the house tomorrow. I want to be alone. I don't want anybody here. And, of course, things turned out a little differently the next morning.
Right.
Thank goodness.
Right. So talk about that. I mean, the fact that she died had to be so devastating and so unreal. Any wonder you felt you were in an altered state of reality, because it was an altered state of reality. The last time you had seen her, which wasn't that long before, she was alive and she was bright and she was cheerful. She was who she was. Never in a million years do people think when their child is leaving that they will never see them again.
Talking about an altered state of reality. And when I woke up the next morning, I did get a couple of hours sleep. Luckily, I had some medication to help me with that. But I woke up thinking, it's a nightmare. It's not real. It didn't happen.
Right. I think that's a very normal reaction to any kind of devastating news, certainly something as tragic as this.
And I woke up for months and months and months afterwards thinking it was all a bad dream. It was all a nightmare.
How was it for you, Joel?
I remember the ride home, and I remember thinking that I'm going home with my son, my wife, our dog, and we left Casey at the hospital. And I felt somehow I'd failed Casey.
Interesting. That you couldn't rescue her.
Yeah, dads are supposed to protect
Right.
their children.
Right. And the fact that you couldn't do anything, even though that was real. The feelings were also real, that you wanted to, that you felt it was vital to do something like that.
There was nothing I could do.
Right.
Well, I guess I could be there for my wife. I could be there for my son. And that's what we tried to do.
That's right. The focus of this program is really to help us understand in those moments, those transitional moments, when you go from just hearing that shocking news to you, Diane, being so clear in, I want to be alone. I just want to sort of understand if this is real or not. What happened? What transpired? You said, thank goodness it didn't work out that you were alone. What happened that next day that helped you?
Maybe you want to address that, Joel?
Yeah, people started arriving. People had known that Casey was in an accident the night before, and so word got out to our friends and my colleagues, and so people started arriving. And people just started doing things, coming in, doing things. But I will say, and I was like this too before, people didn't know what to do or say.
Right.
They didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to say. They came in, many were awkward, many were uncomfortable. There was good support that we got that we can talk about. There was not such good support. And so we learned through this whole process, we learned what was helpful for us. And, I say to people today, I think for a father who's lost a daughter, I'm perhaps the luckiest person in the world because of all the support I've got and all the opportunities I now have to do things in her memory. But I know Diane has some examples of some good support and maybe not such good support.
Well, that's really very instructive, because I think that the first thing, though, is to give everyone some credit. They showed up. Awkward or not, people showed up. So that is really lesson number one in this. If you don't know what to do or you don't want to know what to say, at least show up. Is that correct?
100%. Show up. Don't assume that you don't want to intrude upon people's grief. Don't assume that you'll remind us of Casey or whatever. Show up.
Right. So that's really 80% of life is showing up. We know that from many different quotes and circumstances, but nothing more compelling than in a situation like this. So when people did arrive, how did you experience that? Did you feel a sense of relief? Were you overwhelmed with the number of people that came in? Can you just tell us about your feelings around that?
Despite what I had said to my husband the night before, that I don't want to see anybody tomorrow, I don't want to talk to anybody tomorrow, it was a relief. Even though I was crying, I was screaming at points, it was a relief to have friends there. I know for me, it was important for me to just keep repeating and repeating and repeating what had happened. And, you know, I had friends who just didn't even ask any questions. They came in, they started cleaning the house. We had tons of people coming in and bringing food. And, you know, I had friends taking care of the food, putting things in the refrigerator, bringing them out for people. And, you know, the best thing that could have happened to us was having all of these people come, just arrive, just show up, just to be there for us. And, you know, that continued for quite a while. And I'll have to say that, you know, and I enjoy cooking. I didn't cook a meal for 3 months after the accident because we had people bringing food.
Right.
And being there for us.
Right. That's beautiful. I mean, what a great description. Since there is no script for anything like this, the fact that you could be so open with your feelings, Diane, is really beautiful. That you could just be who you are with all that raw emotion and not be trying to be a hostess by any stretch of the imagination, that you were allowing other people to take care of you. That is a real strength, and I think that needs to be emphasized as well in terms of just the raw grieving that goes on in a situation like this. So I really applaud you, really, for sharing that. It's really fabulous. And Joel, how about you? Are you as open with your emotions, or how did you experience it?
Well, I can tell you that there were 6 or 7 men who told me to be strong. And I didn't know it. Well, I did know what they meant. They didn't want me to tear up. They didn't want me to cry. They thought I should be strong for my wife. They thought I should be strong for my son. And it was impossible not to tear up. It was impossible not to cry. And I think that's something else I talk about. You know, that was telling me what to do. That was telling me how to grieve, and I don't recommend doing that. Mm-hmm. And Diane's dad was of that same philosophy. He told me to be strong for your wife, be strong for my daughter. And that night he had a stroke.
Oh my!
And he's recovered to some extent since then, but I think holding it all in, he had a stroke. So not a single woman told me to be strong, which is really interesting, and maybe it's a commentary on where we are, but you know, we're talking about advice. Don't tell people how to grieve. Don't think that you understand our loss, because you can't. Even if you've lost a child, you can't. Someone said to us, kind of stupidly, but they said, "Oh, I know what you're going through." And then they proceeded to describe the facts that really aren't relevant. But no one knows what you're going through, and it angered me. So there's a lot of anger. There was shock. There was anger during this period of time. But there was also this sense of community and thinking, gosh, there really are people here for us.
Right, right. Well, that's a very interesting analogy of the difference between a woman's reaction, in this case yours, Diane, and your reaction and how you were experiencing the support, at least initially. But just tell me, even though you got that advice, did it make any difference? It seems to me that it was just so profound that no matter how many people told you not to show your emotions, were you able to show your emotions? Did you listen to them or not listen to them?
It was impossible for me to listen to them because the grief was so overwhelming. Although, maybe from one person's observation, what does it mean to be strong? If you think about it, it means, and this is what I thought it meant, don't cry, be strong, be there. But I think that there's another side of it, and I think perhaps even more so for men, being able to display my emotions, being able to cry, being able to ask people, hey, tell me a story about Casey, let me know that you remember Casey. I think that's another type of strength.
Right.
Maybe not the classic
Right.
type of strength. So to answer your question, I was able to grieve. I was able to share that with other people, and it was helpful for me. And there is a plus side to this for the people who are in the support network. Each and every person in a support network can and will grow through this experience. And those that we're close to, they said, you know, never would have wished for it. God dreaded coming over, but knew they had to. But they feel now that they're able to comfort those who need support, and they weren't able to do so before.
Right. In life's journey, we never know what kind of challenges we're going to face, but in every challenge, there is a growth opportunity. And I think that's a really important message that Joel just gave us, that no matter how devastating something can be, if you can rise to that occasion, meaning you can display your emotion, you can let other people help you, you can take it to that next step, that is part of the growth of this journey. So it sounds that like the two of you really also helped one another to grieve, that you were able to really support one another in whatever way you could. You were both very open about your emotions, basically.
I think that Joel was my biggest source of support, as was my son also. And I think that as a family, we grew even closer after Casey's death.
Right. Well, that's all part of the healing process. And that is part of what we're saying. There's growth in everything that we experience if we experience it openly and we embrace it rather than to deny, especially in this case, that it even happened. So let's talk about your father. That is amazing. So in addition to everything else you're dealing with, your father has a stroke, which was probably in some way stress related.
Oh, absolutely. My parents adored Casey. She was probably their favorite grandchild. And yeah, they were close to her. She was close to them. So I know that my father's stroke was related. And it was a severe stroke. He couldn't even come to the funeral. I mean, he was hospitalized. He couldn't come to the service. So he was in the hospital for a period of time and then in a rehab center trying to regain some of the functioning on the left side of his body. So we had a lot to deal with, not only the loss of Casey, but then this severe stroke that my dad experienced.
Right. So I wonder if the lesson learned in this is that you as the parents obviously are the focus of something as devastating as this, but there are other actors in the family, other people that probably need the outreach and the emotional support every bit as much as the parents.
Absolutely.
In retrospect,
Mhm.
would you say, in the best of all possible worlds, some of these friends that came over could have maybe spent even more time with your parents or other significant relatives in this who were also grieving?
Yeah, I mean, you know, my sisters were grieving, you know, tremendously. You know, this was their niece. We're a close-knit family.
Right.
But both of my sisters, thank heavens, were able to get support from their friends.
Right.
And we as a family, you know, tried to support my parents. You know, as did my parents' friends, tried to lend their support to them.
Right, right. So it really does take a village of support, and I think that this was beautifully illustrated in how this couple got support from their friends. But I think the lesson is that everybody who was involved with this in a very close and meaningful way, they also need a lot of outreach and very specific conversations and very specific support and the permission to be able to express their feelings. Tell us about the things that people did that really made a difference. In addition to coming over, making those beautiful meals, cleaning the house, all of which is fantastic. What specifically did things, you know, transgressed further? How did it really help you?
I can give you an example of that. So I've been a practicing attorney for 30 years, and there was never a time if anyone had a case or something that they wanted me to work on that they were shy about asking me. it was about 3 months after, and my partners who I've known for years, they didn't really know what to do with me. I'd come back to work, but I was still feeling my way. One partner came in and he slopped a file down on my desk and he said, "Joel, I need some help on this. Can you get it to me in the next couple of days?" And it was such a gift because everyone was treating me like I was damaged goods. And it's important to think about, we've had a loss. Our lives are never going to be the same. And if we're treated differently and we're not talked to, people ignore us, people don't associate with us after this, we now have isolation, which is layered on top of grief. So that was a real gift, saying, "Joel, you're still a lawyer, you're my partner, get to work and do this." I mean, I could have said no, but I dove right into that,
Right.
and that was sort of like coming back for me.
Right.
I think we could also talk about, when you talked about people that maybe aren't disenfranchised, but maybe not getting the support beyond us, Casey's friends. They didn't know what to do, so what they did is they came over to our house. And they lived at our house from the time Casey died until the funeral and thereafter, and they weren't getting the support from their parents. Their parents couldn't understand the depth of their grief. And you talk about parental grief and parental loss. These young ladies, and men, but mostly young ladies, they were lost.
Right.
20, 21-year-olds, they were lost. So my wife, every Tuesday night, went on for a year and a half, an open invitation to have any of Casey's friends come, and we would have dinner, and we would cry at the beginning, and then after a while we would laugh a little bit more than cry.
But we were able to be open with Casey's friends.
Right.
They would tell Casey stories because she did have a great sense of humor, and she had a great time with her friends, and they adored her. So there would be Casey stories, and we could laugh, and the next minute we would cry. But there was a great comfort in being surrounded by those who really loved Casey, really knew her and knew her personality, knew her as a person, and were also grieving very deeply her loss.
Right. That is beautiful. I just want to say that it really is an exemplar to have Diane Anderson and Joel Feldman with us today, talking about their deep loss and grief from losing their daughter Casey. The 3 key points that we have reviewed in this show are as follows. If you are in a situation where you have to confront this with your friends or family or neighbors, you reach out, don't ask. As you heard, people showed up. They just marched in, and they didn't know what to do in every case or know what to say, but at least they showed up. So that's step number 1. It's really okay if you don't know what to say, because you can't fix it. You can't make it go away. You really do have to just be there and try to do your best. But as we heard, don't dampen down the emotion. Let people experience the emotion. And if anything, we've learned that the emotion is not just in this case with parents, but with other very significant people in the family, like in this case, their grandparents. They could have even probably used more support. Whether that would have prevented her father from having a stroke, we don't know, but we know that it could certainly have helped. Do say the child's name. When the surgeon said, "Your daughter has died and we did everything we could," it sounded too remote. So whether you're a care practitioner, a doctor, a nurse, or you're a friend, use the name and tell stories about this child, because that is really the lived experience, what people will remember in this case about Casey. Again, I want to thank you for being so open, so honest. It's a very tough subject, and again, we don't know when we're going to have to confront this, but we want to do a good job as friends, family, and neighbors. We want to do our best. We want to give our best, and hopefully this show will help you to do that. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a wonderful day. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today and that the information will help you in meeting your health goals. Catch this program and other conversations on the website, drnancyrn.com. Or you can write to me as well. I welcome your comments and feedback. Thank you for listening, and join us again. And remember, with health, all things are possible.